Neeraj, specifically on consulting interviews, what are the key concepts that students should know when they walk into a consulting interview? And also, like, what are the hard questions that you could be asked?
Sure. So key concepts, especially for consulting, know your cases. Like if there's only one thing you prepare for a consulting interview, it's the cases. Because a lot of strategy consulting interviews will require you to do not just one case. Like I've had interviews where I've done 4 cases, which are essentially, to provide some context on what they are, they're basically like 30-minute to an hour long conversations that you have, where you are given a problem. So your problem can be that you have a client which is say a grocery retailer in the UK, and they've recently had a lot of profitability problems, and they don't know what to do about it. That is the case, and it's your job to solve the case, which would be to figure out why they're having profitability issues and what the client can do in order to solve these issues. So it's you. There are 2 types of cases. One are interviewer-led cases where they ask you particular questions. So they'll give you this context which you will have to note down, and then after that they'll keep asking you questions, and like usually it'll be structured in the sense of so it can start with what do you think could be the reasons why the client's having this issue. Secondly, could be, and then like you list all these reasons, and then they will be like, okay, the client has given you slightly more information. So it's a cost related issue. So what are the different ways in which this issue can what are the different reasons why this particular issue can occur? Then it can be, what can we do to solve it? So it can be a very interviewer led question where they give you a question, then you answer it. But it can be very interviewee led as well. So it depends on which firm you apply for. So certain firms will ask you to just take the charge, and then you will have to, once you get the case, drop a framework as to what can be the different causes. Then you ask them questions in the sense of, and then you can kind of communicate that to your interviewer and be like, okay, they're having a profitability issue. It can be either a revenue thing or a cost thing. And if it's a revenue thing, these are the certain elements I would look at. These are the certain elements I would look at. And then you would say, build a hypothesis saying that, oh, I think it's a revenue thing. So then you would ask the interviewer certain questions in the sense that, do we have data on if they've changed any pricing? Do we have data on the sales numbers and so on? So as you keep asking these conversations with the framework, and then like as they give you data, something will have to hit, right? Because it's a profitability case, and if your framework is good, you will have the problem within the framework somewhere. So when they tell you, okay, yeah, it's a revenue thing, our sales have been dropping, that's when you know, okay, so we are having a profitability issue because we're not selling as much. And then you kind of drive the case to figure out why they're not selling as much and what they can do to improve. So those are the 2 ways in which cases can be structured, and it's something that people prepare a lot for. So I've seen people prepare months before their consulting interviews for these cases, because they are very important for the firms to make a decision, because at the end of the day they are a short version of what a consulting project would look like, because we would have very similar starting conversations with the client, right? Like client would be like, yeah, we're not making profit, tell us what we can do about it, because that's basically why they would come to a consulting firm. So you have very similar conversations with the client, you ask for very similar data from the client, you think in a very similar way, and you ask and you give solutions in a very similar way. So it kind of tests your ability to be an actual consultant. So I think that's a very important thing when it comes to consulting assessment centers.
How would you actually recommend to prepare for those cases?
So there are different material you can use to do it. So there is a book by Victor Cheng which is very helpful. There is a book called Case in Point which is very helpful. There is a website called Crafting Cases which a lot of people use as well. So there are different ways to do it, and these are different ways to learn about casing and like what are the ways you can solve a case. And because the one key important thing in cases is to be structured. These resources help you build a structure. It's not necessarily about using a set framework, but it's about learning the different ways in which such problems can be solved, so that when the interviewer gives you a problem, like you can develop a framework to solve it yourself. So these are some very good resources, but at the end of the day, it's about practice. So you should find a casing partner that you keep doing cases with, so that like you know how it works in an interviewer setting. They can give you real-time feedback on what you're doing good, what you're not doing well. And once you interview them, you also realize what they're doing good and what they're not doing very well, and you can kind of help build each other up.
Amazing. Could you maybe give us an example of a question that you have been asked so far that was very challenging or very difficult, if you remember anything like that?
Aren't they all?
I personally find things like how many windows are there in London, like those questions, I find them really hard for some reason.
Consultants love it. That like you're gonna get something wacky like that in an interview for sure, because market sizing is a very like it's a part of the case interview as well. So like sometimes you have to do market sizing of like the grocery market in the UK, which makes sense. But then there would also be interviews such as how many windows are there in the Shard, like it's it takes you back a little bit, and these are particularly challenging, especially in consulting interviews. But at the end of the day, I don't think that looking for an answer. To be honest, I don't even think they know the answer themselves. But they're just looking at the way you think. So how would you structure that? So like when I think about it, I would look at, the different floors that are there in the Shard. So that gives you an idea of like how many, like that gives you a base to work on. You'll think about how many windows there will be in like one floor. So if there are 2 windows per floor vertically, that's when you know that okay, there will be like when you go up the Shard, like there'll be say 60 floors and 2 windows per floor. So that's like 120 windows that are just like going up. And then you think about how wide the Shard is, so you can kind of go from there. So all they're looking for is a structure where they can see how you're thinking, and that is it. I don't think they're looking for an answer, and that's very important to know, because like the fact that you know how many windows are there in the Shard like will not impact your consulting thing, but how you think about finding the answer will.